Hi, I want to welcome everyone to our show. My name is Derek Winans, and with me I have Stephanie C., Anna, Aaron, and Stephanie F. And our topic today is going to be whether the Free and Appropriate Education Mandate, more commonly known as FAPE, which was introduced in 1973, should include mandatory applied behavior analysis for children with autism spectrum disorder in public schools. To give a little background on FAPE, it was part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and was developed to give children with disabilities the same rights in receiving a free public education suitable to their needs as their typically developing peers. One of the ways that FAPE ensures that students receive an individualized education is through an individualized education program, or an IEP, for each student with a disability. Required for students participating in special education or recipients of funding under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I want to briefly discuss IDEA. It is a law that ensures that children with disabilities receive the services they need to be provided with the same services as their typically developing peers. Under IDEA, it covers birth to 2 years of age, which is an early intervention service for children and their families. And Part B, which is for children ages 3 to 21, so those who have an IEP that will receive special education services. In addition, FAPE is for students with disabilities, and it must be placed in the same setting as those that are typically developing to the maximum extent possible. This not only includes time in the classroom, but time during recess, lunch, and their special subjects such as art and PE. During the evaluation part of the IEP process in FAPE, they state that it is illegal for students to be placed based on the assumption of the disability they are labeled as. Therefore, as an example, if they have autism, they also have a deficit in social skills, so they need programming that will beef up their social skills. But under this, it is illegal and it should not be assumed. Under parents' rights, it is the parents' rights to hold a hearing if they disagree with any portion of the IEP. So a lot of times this happens when the IEP is either too lenient or too stringent, in which the parents want to make it more on the level that they believe their child is at. So, and they are also to be notified whenever program decisions are made by the school. So if they decide to start doing an intervention, it is at their discretion that this is happening. The graphs that are going to show up in a minute here were found in the National Center for Education Statistics. In Figure 1, this is looking at the distribution of children and youth ages 3 to 21, so those that have an IEP and are covered under IDEA. This graph is from the year 2014-2015, so a couple years ago. But it discusses the disability types and what percentages are under FAPE and IDEA. So for specific learning disability, which takes up a large percent of the distribution at 35%, a specific learning disability is discussed to be one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using a language, spoken or written, that may manifest itself in an imperfect ability to think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. The next disability type that has the next greatest distribution is speech and language impairment at 20%, and then autism is fourth at 9%. The second figure I'm going to discuss is a graph that depicts the percentage of students under IDEA that are placed in general education. So under FAPE, children need to be placed in the least restrictive environment possible to the maximum extent possible. And this graph kind of shows the progress we've made in accomplishing this task. So the top line is each student that is in a general education for 80% of their time or more, and then it kind of goes down from there to 40 to 79% and less than 40% time spent in a general education classroom. So as you can see, over the years from 1990 to 2014 and 15, the number of or the percentage of children, rather, that are in the 80% or more of time spent in general education classrooms has increased dramatically. To give a brief background on ABA, it is explained by the important principles of reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement being increases future behavior, and punishment being anything that decreases future behavior. ABA can be used to teach a wide variety of skills that can include academic, reading, self-help skills such as toothbrushing, washing hands, and social skills which can involve parallel play and turn-taking. There are a wide variety of interventions with the purpose of increasing both the child and the parent's quality of life. These can include discrete trial instruction, PECs, joint attention intervention, and pivotal response treatment. All of those treatments and many more are a part of ABA's, which uses evidence-based procedures, which are peer-reviewed, can be replicated, and generalized to multiple different settings and children. It can also be used on children as young as 2 throughout adulthood. There's a large emphasis on data-based decisions in ABA. So the basic idea is don't make a decision without first collecting data. They then analyze the data and make a decision strictly based on that data that was collected. Since ABA has been gaining traction in using evidence-based practices and treatments in improving the lives and families of those with autism spectrum disorders, many have been questioning whether these services should be included in FAPE. Those that oppose ABA being included in FAPE often discuss how expensive these services would cost and whether a public school is the best place for ABA, given the curriculum teachers are to uphold. I'm going to speak to Anna next, and she's here with us to discuss some of the benefits regarding FAPE.
Some of the benefits is the foundation of the child's entitlement to appropriate public education. School districts are required to educate students with disabilities in regular classrooms with non-disabled peers in the school they would attend if not disabled to the maximum extent appropriate with support of aids and services required. This does not mean that every student has to be in a general education classroom. The objective is to place students in a natural learning environment as possible within their home community. Michael Kelly noted that the goal of FAPE was created to ensure that families and advocates understood and implemented IDEA provisions at both local and state levels. The PACE Law Review states, if a child is classified under these requirements, they are entitled to special education and related services provided by public expense, under public direction and supervision and without charge. If they meet the standards of the state educational agency, as well as include an appropriate preschool, elementary school, or secondary school education in the state involved and are provided in conformity with the Individualized Education Program, also known as the IEP. FAPE supports an IEP that is designed to meet an individual's unique needs. Therefore, it provides the student with educational benefits and prepares them for further education, employment, and independent living. The IEP, which contains the statement of the special education and related services to meet each disabled student's unique needs, forms the basis for the entitlement of each student with a disability to an individualized and appropriate education. The relationship of IDEA's LRE, also known as the least restrictive environment, requirements to the IEP process is key. Since under IDEA, the student's IEP forms the basis for the student's placement decisions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pros and the benefits of LRE. I have 3 benefits, and the first is equal education. A child will be taught the same curriculum as their peers and have the same academic advantages offered to them, which they might not be given in a special education classroom. Integrated classrooms teach children with autism how to learn in a standard classroom environment, often with the help of a behavioral aid so that they do not fall behind with the workload. Learning in this environment from an early age means that students will adapt well to higher education classrooms, so they can go on to pursue a university or college degree. The next benefit is social interactions. Your child will be given the opportunity to socialize with a diverse group of peers and therefore improve upon their social skills. They will learn acceptable behaviors and social cues and benefit from being in a standard learning environment. Being in this shared environment will also allow all students of differing abilities to learn from each other and forge friendships. This fosters acceptance and understanding, which will translate to outside the classroom. The last benefit is diversity. Diversity in the classroom can be applied both academically and socially. However, it warrants its own section as it plays such a large role in why inclusion in classrooms is important. Integrated classrooms create a diverse environment that lessens the stigma surrounding individuals with disabilities. When students are given the chance to interact and share with each other, they learn about each other's differences, including diverse thoughts, patterns, and creative processes. This gives children new points of views, which they can learn from and integrate into their own development, and ultimately carry with them into their futures. In the long run, this could help promote acceptance of the special needs community by decreasing segregation between individuals with disabilities and their peers without disabilities.
All right, Anna, thank you so much for giving us some of the benefits of FAPE and more specifically the least restrictive environment, which is one of the things that you pointed out, which the benefits included an equal education with support of an aid if needed, social interactions, diversity, which as we know is a key in public education. You also quickly discussed FAPE as an individualized process. And I think things such as the IEP are an important part of FAPE, individualized process. Next, we're going to go to Stephanie C., who's going to discuss some of the potential downfalls that FAPE as a federal mandate is.
Okay. So one of the things that Anna mentioned was having the IEP as part of FAPE, which, as was mentioned a couple of times, is the individualized education program. And the big part of that is ensuring that the student is receiving the education that's most appropriate for them. The IEP not only includes academic services, but it also includes related services, which could be things like occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and ABA. However, there are some differences between those related services and offering ABA. Oftentimes, things like speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy are for short periods of time, 1 or 2 days a week, whereas ABA is often intensive therapy that's one-on-one and would require students to be out of the classroom for longer periods of time than other related services. As far as FAPE goes, too, the most important thing to remember about FAPE is that it's free, appropriate public education. It has to be the education that's most appropriate for each individual student, not the best education that money can buy. Over the years, parents have taken schools to court about different issues that they've seen or that they think have been the case with schools or school districts not meeting their child's needs or thinking that the placement and things are not appropriate. So if we look at the graph for procedural violations, there have been things in there like parent participation, the child's placement, the evaluation process, issues with the IEP or unqualified personnel. And as you can see, in each of these categories, it has been the school or school district that has overwhelmingly won the majority of these cases. Going on to the substantive violations, this is things like parents thinking that services aren't being provided, students not making progress, transition between classrooms and programs, different things like that. You do have parents winning some more of these cases, but still overall, as far as FAPE and the IEP and everything, the schools have been pretty on top of what they have to do for that and keeping up with what's required for the students as the most appropriate. Along with FAPE 2, part of the problem, or part of what goes along with FAPE, is the least restrictive environment. So the student has to be in a general education classroom for the maximum extent appropriate with students that do not have disabilities. But part of the problem with doing the ABA therapy in school is that you're pulling the student from the least restrictive environment or the general education setting. So that's limiting their access to their non-disabled peers and the general education settings and the academics that they would be learning during the time that they're not there. But students with autism spectrum disorders already kind of have their own unique set of challenges. They have different things that motivate them that sometimes need to be more specific than a teacher can provide in a whole class setting. They often have decreased or absent background knowledge and skill to benefit from typical learning environments like the general education setting. They have an uneven profile of strengths and weaknesses, and obviously that's different for each child. And they have a need for intensive instruction with increased repetition and effective programming to learn. And they also have challenging behaviors that can interfere with learning and socialization. So very often, students with autism spectrum disorders, their least restrictive environment would not typically be the general education setting. And in the court case of Harmon versus the Loudoun County Board of Education, it was determined that mainstreaming is not required under 3 circumstances. The first is if marginal benefits are far outweighed by the benefits that could be obtained in a separate instructional setting. The second is if the student is a disruptive force in the general education setting. And the third is if the student with a disability would not receive educational benefit from mainstreaming. Another issue to kind of look at too, as far as what's the most appropriate education for these students, if you were to do ABA therapy in school, you run into the possibility of ethical violations from the BCBAs. Specifically Ethical Code 2.06, maintaining confidentiality. That becomes a lot more difficult when you're working in a public school setting and you're working with students in and out of the classroom. There's teachers, principals, other staff, and things like that to worry about. So those are some of the negatives to having, or to FAPE and kids with autism spectrum disorders.
Okay, 7C, thank you so much for having us possible weaknesses of FAPE. So to quickly summarize what she was discussing, I think one of the highlights that she said was FAPE is a free and appropriate. And appropriate, it says, just because they have an IEP doesn't mean it's the best or an education that they are receiving. A second thing that she noted was that there were several weaknesses of FAPE in which there are access to actual classroom time because they are often pulled for other therapies such as speech or ABA, which can limit how much time they're actually in the classroom. And that there's an uneven profile of strengths and weaknesses in children with special needs, and more specifically autism, that there are challenging behaviors in the classroom from children with disabilities, which can take away from the learning of not only children with autism spectrum disorder, but other typically developing children as well. And she briefly highlighted the code 2.06 confidentiality as being a possible limitation of BCBAs coming in and out of the classroom. One of the last things is that I think she did a good job highlighting the graphs that represent the struggles of school districts and parents in deciding the appropriate education for students with disabilities. We're going to switch topics a little bit and start discussing some of the potential benefits of using ABA in the school system. Here with us today is Stephanie F. to discuss some of those benefits.
There are many resources available that support various therapies in terms of reducing the presenting symptoms of children with developmental disabilities. Research often points to applied behavior analysis, or ABA, as a safe and effective therapy for a child with behavioral, social, and communication qualifications of effective therapy, according to Zane, Davis, and Rossworm, there must be proof of an operational definition of terms, experimental design, control groups, validity of assessments, and the replication of findings. Based on these criteria, ABA is proven to be an effective treatment for individuals. When looking at providing interventions for our clients with developmental disabilities, we must look at the individual's needs. Often these needs include academic domain-based targets. Zacher, Ben Ichkrak, Rabovich, and Lacht compared 2 interventions and their effect on improving a child's social, communicative, and cognitive deficits. The 2 interventions that were compared were eclectic development and ABA. Eclectic therapy often includes a combination of TEACH, which is treatment and education of autistic and communication-related handicapped children, sensory integration therapy, and non-intensive ABA methods. These researchers found that the ABA approach that utilized discrete trial treatment, defined learning goals, mass trialing, prompting and reinforcement strategies significantly improved the client's communicative, social, and academic deficits. However, it is often the case that the academic improvement is not the greatest need for our clients. The individuals who meet the necessary qualifications for an IEP or intensive intervention needs often exhibit behavior complications that impede their learning. These complications may include aggression, tantruming, elopement, excessive movements such as rocking and hand flapping. Children with these complications may benefit from ABA strategies to reduce competing behavior and increase on-task behaviors, which will ultimately encourage skill acquisition. The behavior management component is, in my opinion, by far the most important principle when considering the level of appropriateness for this intervention. According to Zane, Davis, and Rossworm, there has been an overall increase in behavior intervention and modification plan options outside of ABA. A popular alternative, which I previously mentioned for treatment, is sensory integration therapy. The use of techniques such as deep pressure, weighted vests, and brushing of the body are found in the sensory integration intervention model, and they claim to have a calming effect, which is conducive to encourage an increase in on-task behavior. Zane, Davis, and Rossworm reported nearly 80% of occupational therapists use treatments such as sensory integration in their weekly interventions. These treatments, however, fail to find any empirical support. These interventions also violate the core ethical principle of pursuit of excellence. It's the role of the behavior analyst in keeping up to date on the latest research within our specialty. This includes incorporating the most up-to-date and research-proven methods and procedures of our practice. Applied behavior analysis is based on the daily analyzing of an individual's data and graphs to make data-based decisions that ultimately increase an individual's independence. A failure to use research-based interventions also violates the Ethical Code 2.09a. This code deals directly with treatment and intervention efficacy. It states that clients have a right to effective treatment, meaning research-based, replicated, and individually adapted to meet the needs of the client in order to be considered effective. These treatments must be proven to have both short and long-term benefits to our clients. ABA is research-based and is individually modified based on a battery of assessments used to analyze present levels, areas of need, and methods in which to best accomplish these projected goals, making it a statistically sound intervention option. An additional benefit of ABA treatment techniques is the varying levels of intensities available. ABA assumes that the more intensive treatment hours a client receives, the more beneficial the outcomes. Howard, Sparkman, Cohen, and Green analyzed the effects of 3 treatment approaches on autism spectrum disorders. The 3 treatments were intensive behavior analytic intervention, a public education classroom structure, and a non-intensive public early learning intervention program. These 3 treatments were varied based on the level of hour intensity and ratios of student to staff. The intensive behavior analytic intervention was a ratio of 1-to-1, with clients receiving anywhere from 25 to 40 hours of intervention per week. As compared to the other conditions that range from combinations of smaller ratios or small group setting, similar to that of a mainstreamed education classroom, the intensive behavior analytic intervention group saw the most progress across several domains. These domains included cognitive skills, nonverbal language skills, receptive and expressive language skills, communication, self-help, social, and motor skill sets. I'm going to pull up a visual to kind of share with you guys. So if you look at this graph, you can see along the x-axis down below, there are the 8 domains that were assessed. And you can see, as represented by the bars, the different levels of intervention intensity. And some of those, the first dark blue one is the intensive ABA, which looked like they received about 30 hours on average of ABA weekly. The intensive multi-treatment, they had more collaborative types of treatment, which included the occupational therapy, speech therapy, and some of those smaller groups that you might find in a mainstream classroom. And then the low intensity multi-treatment group, which received 15 hours of therapy. You can see that with some of the therapies that were either not as intensive or more collaborative, some of the individuals lost some of the skill sets in those domains. And you can see the highest increase in both skill acquisition and rate of learning was in the intensive ABA group. The results from this study indicated that the intensive behavior analytic intervention produced above normal learning and retention rates for skill acquisition in all the area domains. In fact, children in the intensive behavior analytic intervention group exhibited significantly larger than average treatment gains in all domain areas as compared to the combined scores from the children in the public education or non-intensive early intervention classrooms. Outcomes of intensive behavior analytic interventions and treatments that are considered standard interventions, meaning consisting of resources in the community that are provided by typical school-based small education classrooms, have been compared, and the results indicate that those individuals who received the highest level of therapeutic intensity and treatment hours showed the most significant improvements throughout all domains. Zane, Davis, and Rossum's study suggests that time and money spent on intensive behavior-based interventions ultimately result in lower costs for supporting individuals throughout their lifetime. ABA intensive techniques are proven to make the most significant progress over a lifetime. Applied behavior analysis methods are a safe, effective, and reliable intervention for individuals with both academic and behavior-based deficits.
All right, great, Stephanie F. Thank you so much for giving us some of the benefits of ABA in a school setting. To quickly highlight some of those benefits, she briefly discussed the safe and effective being the use of evidence-based procedures. As I talked about in the introduction, those include interventions that are replicated and peer-reviewed and are shown to increase the behavior they're looking to increase. So she quickly talked about the eclectic versus ABA, and some of those eclectic programs being programs like TEACH, and the study showed that ABA improved not only academic skills, but also social and communicative skills as well, but also work to decrease problem behaviors, which can help to increase some of those other behaviors such as social communication and academic skills. She highlighted areas such as the pursuit of excellence, which is having those evidence-based procedures and not using procedures that are not evidence-based, such as sensory integration. And she talked about the code 2.09a, which is the right to effective treatment, so using treatments such as EVPs over those that aren't evidence-based. Next, we're going to talk to Erin, who's going to discuss some of the weaknesses or possible problems of using ABA in a school setting.
All right. Well, I, on the other hand, believe it would cost the schools way too much to implement ABA. A source from speciallearning.com states that ABA services can cost up to $47,000 a year per child. Many reports indicate that a majority of public school funding is decreasing over the years, and now President Trump is proposing to cut funds for the education department by about $9.2 billion. According to NPR.org, the budget plan would remove $2.4 billion in grants for teacher training. This is a huge concern when considering mandating ABA services under FAPE, because Boot and Hume discuss how school systems are already struggling to find personnel who are well enough trained in the principles of ABA. If schools are receiving less funding to train teachers, then how are we going to expect the schools to train the staff on how to effectively implement the principles of ABA and ensure that treatment is being implemented with fidelity? Research suggests that teacher quality is the most important school-based determinant of student success. With the planned school budget cuts and the high cost of ABA, this would cause a huge financial problem. If we add ABA, we will be taking away funds that need to be used for different areas within the school, and I cannot see this as being effective. However, Boot and Hume provide school systems with 3 possible suggestions to ensure that students will receive effective ABA treatment. But with these suggestions come some cons. The first suggestion they offer is that service providers pursue certification as a behavior analyst. This would require service providers to have a master's degree, 1,500 supervision hours in the field of ABA, and the completion of the BCBA exam. This would not be a feasible solution because it's long-term and would take nearly 2 years. The next solution would be to provide 5 days of intensive training to the public school staff through the use of lecture, role play, and application with students. This sounds like a great idea because it would cost far less than becoming a BCBA and would be less time, but how well would these staff really be trained on the principles of ABA? ABA is intensive, and 5 days of training does not seem effective. The last solution for public schools is to hire contracted BCBAs to serve as consultants. This is a very pricey solution. And as this chart you will see soon on the screen is going to show an example of what a company is charging right now for BCBA consultation. If you go down to the BCBA section and then over to the case supervision, you can see that they are charging $175 an hour for consultation in the public schools, which will also lead back to the public school funding problem that we are already experiencing.
Okay, thank you, Erin, for briefly highlighting some of the potential problems in incorporating ABA into the school setting. One of them, which is costs, which is up to $47,000 a year for each BCBA to be in the school. And system that is already decreasing the funds, which you said are $9.2 billion to education. That can make it very difficult to implement ABA in a school setting. You talked about the teacher quality being an important aspect of learning for children, and that ABA can take away from that quality because of decreases in training and funding. You discussed that there are potential solutions to being able to incorporate ABA into, but there were some problems with those solutions. One of their solutions was to have more individuals become certified in BCBA, but the requirements are long-term, that the training to start teaching some of the basic concepts of ABA might not be sufficient, and the quality of the treatment could, or the training could be low, and that you could also hire consultants, but that it's a pricey endeavor. So we're getting a question in from Twitter right now about following our debate on our page. And I want to direct this to Erin. What responsibility would schools have to properly train school personnel in the principles of ABA?
Okay. If ABA is going to be implemented within the school, then it is the school's responsibility to train the staff. And like I discussed earlier, 5 days of intensive training could be provided for the staff, although I believe 5 days is not enough to effectively learn the principles of ABA and to implement the procedures with fidelity. Or schools can hire outside contracting companies that will come in and consult with the teachers and other staff and look at the children's data and just continue to be there for the staff as support.
Okay, great. Thank you for giving us an answer to that question from Twitter. We got a couple more coming in, so we're going to try to answer some more of these questions before we end our program. So the next question is ABA therapy that can be used on typically developing children, or does it only work for children with disabilities? I'm going to go ahead and field this question because I briefly introduced both FAPE and ABA at the beginning of this segment. It can work for all children. It uses the core principles of reinforcement and punishment to both increase and decrease the future occurrences of behaviors. It also uses interventions such as token economies and group contingencies, which are two techniques frequently used in ABA, but also in the classroom as well. So children of all ages and abilities can benefit from the core principles of ABA. Our next question is going to be asked of both Anna and Stephanie C., which is, when providing ABA services in a school setting, can a student still receive educational instruction to the maximum extent possible?
I'll go ahead and look at the benefits of this. Participation of students with autism in the general education environment is often called mainstreaming or inclusion. Inclusion does not mean placing a student with autism in general education just like a typical learner. A variety of supports are provided to create a successful environment and experience for everyone involved. IDEA provides a team approach to planning and placement decisions so that the objectives of all members of the team can be considered. Careful planning and training are essential to provide the right modifications and accommodations. Supports might include a specially trained classroom or one-on-one paraprofessional, altering testing environments or expectations, adapting curriculum, visual supports, or adaptive equipment.
Okay, and kind of looking at the cons of that, as I mentioned earlier, students on the autism spectrum typically already have their own set of unique challenges that make learning difficult. And if you would be providing ABA therapy in school, again, you're pulling students out for more time than may be beneficial to them because they're missing out on different academic, education, and socialization opportunities that they would have in that general education classroom setting. So.
Okay, thank you guys for providing kind of both sides of the benefits and potential downfalls of that question. So our last question before we conclude is, what is the goal of FAPE? And I'm going to direct this to both Anna and Stephanie C. again.
Okay. So overall, the goal of FAPE is to provide a free, appropriate public education to students with disabilities. And that would also consist of educational instruction that's designed to meet the unique needs of a student with disabilities. And they can also be supported by services that are needed to permit the student to benefit from instruction. So they have to be receiving a free, appropriate public education, but also any supports and services that they need to be able to benefit from whatever instruction they receive.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie C. Anna, do you have anything to add to that?
Just to look into that, FAPE allows parents to be involved as much as they can as well. So just also a benefit would be that FAPE allows the parents to be as involved as they would like to.
Okay, great, thank you. To conclude this segment, it is the opinion of this news station that providing ABA services should be mandatory under FAPE, even though there are considerations such as least restrictive environment, costs, and caseload for BCBAs and training of school staff. The benefits for providing these services to students with autism spectrum disorder far outweigh any of the cons. It is the opinion of this news station that FAPE should include ABA services for children with autism spectrum disorder in the school setting. Although the undertaking of implementing such services would be significant, it is in the best interest of the children to receive evidence-based practices found by researchers in the field. Thanks Stephanie C., Stephanie F., Anna, and Aaron for discussing the topic of including ABA services in FAPE. Thank you for watching and have a great night.